Hello again. This is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. Thinking about the Doug Percy testimony here and his complete inability to remember really anything. I'm thinking about all of the thousands of people that he's in charge of and supervises and is in, as they euphemistically like to call them, persons in their care. But he's got, legal duties over all these people, and it occurred to me to look up some statistics here. So most of this is from prisonpolicy.org, and I want to give all credit to where credit is due. But apparently, most of these numbers are from 2021, so I think pretty accurate here. In the state of Wisconsin, and as we'll see later on, we're apparently up there with the world's number one leader, which is the United States. I think we're like 1 point behind the United States, so we're the top of the top in terms of per capita people in prison. So that's we spend a lot of time and money keeping people in prisons. So 20,000 people. Doug Percy, supervises a majority of that, where he was at the adult prisons there when he was the supervisor of Novak. He was basically in charge of about half the adult prisons. So we'll get into this adult male prisons, which is still going to be a large majority of the 20,000 here. Many people, I think this is a key thing. Yeah, let's just say this is out of, I think, 100,000 people incarcerated. The United States has 664. Wisconsin has 663. Just for comparison, the next closest place in NATO, I guess in the Western world, is 129 for the United Kingdom. Denmark has 72. I've seen Danish jails. They're nothing compared to jails in the United States. And they have less of them, and they're run cheaper. So, ours is just like sort of like the healthcare. Ours are worse and cost more. That's disturbing. Here, I think is the key number here. If you look at this is the number of people incarcerated per 100,000 by race. You got white 416. You got Hispanic at 622, Black 4,000, and American Indian about 2,500. So don't forget that in much of the north of Wisconsin, that Native Americans occupy much the same role of minorities as blacks do in the city of Milwaukee. The thing that's interesting about that is actually in many parts of Wisconsin, Hispanics are actually a greater proportion of the population than blacks are. You can tell the incarceration numbers haven't changed. But it really is shockingly disproportionate. Whereas whites make up about 83% of the population in Wisconsin. That sounds about right. They're make up 52% of the prisoners, so that's a pretty big divergence. Latinos, they're right at 6%. Natives are 1% of the population, Native Americans, and make up about 4% of the prison population. So that is really easy for those of you who don't like math. 1 to 4, we can handle that. And blacks, who I guess make up about 6% of the population, which I think that's high, are apparently 38% of the incarceration, the people incarcerated. So more than 6 times what you would expect. And whites are about 60% of what you would expect. So I know when I was in law school, I did a lot of research, and there was some research, let's say, and I think the numbers maintained throughout from the 60s up until I think 2015, which is about the last time that I looked at it, which was this. Black people, same ratios, make up about 6% of the population. That fluctuates. White people make up about 80% of the population. That fluctuates slightly. Okay. Black people, 80% of the time, black people get charged with murder as opposed to manslaughter. 80% of the time, white people get charged with manslaughter as opposed to murder. Okay, you got to think about how that number adds up, but it's in the charging category only. Whites are vast. I mean, it's entirely flipped. And again, if somebody could divide, 80, 6% into 80, that they would know how exactly how disproportionate that is. But I think the rest of us, who are not gonna be so risky, are going to understand that it's quite large. So we also have to understand, of course, there is a huge amount of people, something like double that number, maybe 3 times that number, who are what we call out on paper. That's either probation or parole, some kind of court-ordered supervision by the government. That's also extremely high. So let's keep that in mind. So that is an overview of the population that Mr. Percy is helping to supervise here. So I also think it is, fairly significant when you look at Mr. He just doesn't seem like he's the kind of person that you want supervising some, roughly speaking, 20,000 other individuals who are ultimately at the mercy of these individuals. And, not that he is evil or corrupt. We don't have that evidence necessarily. We just don't have, it seems like we've got evidence that he's not that good at his job or good at taking responsibility. And, that's my opinion, and I'll leave that up to you. That's where I found that evidence to lead. But you would think that in the state of Wisconsin, we could find somebody who was good at taking responsibility and leading and making decisions and directing their subordinates especially when requested. So I think that's the bigger thing ultimately. Is it's just so patently obvious to everybody that he knew what was going on ahead of time. And it's so patently obvious that the investigators knew that. And it's so patently obvious, as I think we'll see later on when we get to Chrissy Preston, the actual chief investigator, that they knew exactly what was going on, but their hands were tied because ultimately it's the secretary that's making the decision. And Secretary Carr didn't see fit to discipline that male employee. So that, I think, is part of the larger context here of why all these things matter, not just for Sue Novak and the people at that level. Although we are getting a very fascinating glimpse at the warden level and above, but also for the people at the bottom, too. So that's always something to keep in mind. Remember the prisoners here. Remember, these are real people in charge of real people. And that's part of what we're doing here, is showing the spotlight on maybe they shouldn't be. Okay? So stick with us. We'll keep you informed.